evenings, everyone. Welcome to the African Esquire show on We Charge Colonialism TV. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie. Today, we're going to discuss an article that I wrote this past weekend, or really discuss the subject that I touch on in the article. And that is on this new food crisis that's going to affect Africans, really everyone, but Africans and people who are in the global south generally, but Africans specifically, we have to point out because unfortunately, due to globalization, due to colonialism, the way that we have become dependent on this international system is unlike any other group. Everything from food aid, everything from trade. In so many ways, we become completely dependent on the same people who we know are exploiting us. And that's going to really be detrimental to us inside of this time if we do not wake up to what's going on. So I'm going to discuss some of what is in that article. We'll go through it briefly because you can read the whole thing on WeChargeColonialism.org. I'll post the link. The link is always in the description, so you can read the whole article there. So before I get into that, really quickly, We Charge Colonialism. We're an organization. We're pushing for the anti-colonial struggle to be magnified, amplified, particularly in a day where people are scared to talk about colonialism or maybe even confused, not sure of what it is, not sure of how it relates to our day-to-day, particularly as African people. We're really struggling with something that some of us can't identify because it's this invisible system that has existed before all of us have been alive. So we have to identify that system. We have to dissect that system. And that's really what we try to do at WCC. You can go to our website. From there, you can see a bunch of articles talking about different things around colonialism. You can also follow our pages, our YouTube pages, obviously. And also, please do, while you're on our website, go ahead to the tab that says AUMD. We're a part of a coalition of Pan-African and African-led organizations that are seeking to have a really in-depth conversation about the issue of colonialism faced today by African people. Not necessarily what was faced before, but how are we struggling with this today? We know today we're dealing with neo-colonialism. Neo-colonialism is like colonialism, but it's unique in certain ways. In certain ways, we have to identify and dissect that as well and understand that we're dealing with a different monster than what many of our former freedom fighters may have dealt with. So because of that, we're having a convention. It's Pan-African Unity or Perish, the call for the abolition of neo-colonialism. That's going to be in July 21st through 23rd. It's going to be hybrid. It's going to be online for all of us in the West and whatnot. There is going to be an in-person event held in Zimbabwe. And really, it's important that you register, even if you're not sure about your dates, whether you'll be available for the entirety of that, because the recordings will be accessible to you even after the convention. So you'll be able to go back and watch. So let's say you work a 9 to 5, you're like, I can't really sit down for a 3-day convention. You can go back and watch everything, all the presentations from different dynamic speakers, different people who have really put a lot of effort into putting forth their best and actually talking about what is happening to our people. We have to understand we're in a state of emergency. That's really the whole reason of having this talk. It's not because we like it. It's not because we like talking just to make ourselves feel good. It's because we understand that we're in a state of emergency as a people. And I would say, as I'm going to allege in this video, facing in many ways genocide. Once again, we've been victims of genocide before. And the globalist system has wrapped us into a unique genocide because it's so distinct. It's so easy to miss because supposedly these are just the systems of today operating without any ill intent. But if you understand the nexus of things like the WTO, things like the IMF, things like the World Bank, creating this system of giving loans to countries and trade and giving loans and trading with countries, but the requirements for engaging with these programs is that you forfeit your own nationalist policies and become a part of this global system. And the global system, they told us, will take care of us. The global system won't fail us. They told us globalism is going to move us forward. The fact that we have an international economy is going to move us forward. But what we see happening right now is with this conflict, with Ukraine and Russia. And before that, it was even the coronavirus pandemic, how there was shutdowns everywhere, that this global system is built to fail. It's built to fail anytime there's an emergency. It's built to fail some people more than others. And unfortunately, African people, we are going to be most affected if we don't quickly wake up and change tactics and leave these exploitative institutions. So I'm going to go right over to the article. Like I said, it's on WeChargeColonialism.org. If you go under articles, you'll see it there. In the title of the article, Food Shortages or Strategic Genocide. And I'm going to just go through briefly because, again, I want you to read the whole thing. But the whole idea of it is that we have to understand that the European led colonial system has let us know how they feel about us, right? They've told us over and over again that they see African people as a problem. Even before the population growth aspect came into play, they've always found a way to try to segregate us, try to keep us concentrated in certain areas, whether it's internationally, keep us concentrated into certain countries, keep us concentrated into certain neighborhoods. And if you're talking about if people who actually live in these Western nations, they've always tried to find ways to not deal with the consequences of enslaving, colonizing, and oppressing a people over not just centuries, like over a long time. Like, we have to understand the generational trauma is something so significant that time can't even be put on it. That's how significant this is. So they've been oppressing us. They've been keeping us inside of this system. And because of that, a lot of things are happening that they can't necessarily control. The one thing that we've heard repeatedly is immigration. The European nations in particular, because we know geographically, Europe is closer to Africa. You can take a boat ride from Africa to Europe. And I'm not aware of people doing that in recent times with America. So basically, Europe is the one facing this huge problem that they've created. That is that they have devastated the African continent and also a lot of Middle Eastern countries to the point where people are fleeing. People are trying to find ways out of this hell that was created for them, whether it's hunger, starvation, whether it's the climate crisis, whether it is the wars that are instigated so that these colonial nations can loot African nations. They have created a hell for many people. And inevitably, as people say, there's a place over there that this is not happening, a lot of people have been picking up and trying to move into Europe. We've seen horrific videos of people even drowning. Many people, thousands of people have drowned in the Mediterranean trying to reach Europe. Something that's a very dangerous trip. I've spoken against it. Like, y'all, this is not something you want to play with. But I understand at the same time, I'm not in that position. I'm not living inside of these conditions like they are. The conditions I'm living in America, yes, certainly I'm living inside a racially isolated, colonialist state. But I know that I'll have food to eat, at least today, right? I know that I have clothes. I know I have shelter for this foreseeable future. People who don't even know where they're going to sleep tonight. That's a desperate situation to be in. And many Africans have been put in that situation. So immigration has become a problem in Europe. They've said it many times. You've heard many of the prominent elite come out and say, hey, we have to do something about all these people coming to Europe, not just Africans, but also people in the Middle East. But Africa has a unique problem when it comes to Europe because Africa's population is increasing so drastically. It's predicted that by 2050, that the population of the African continent will double. So imagine double people trying to leave Europe, double people trying to or leave Africa and go into Europe, double people trying to escape the hell that's been created for them. Now, really, people try to make population growth seem so horrible. Africa could absolutely feed all its people, could absolutely house all its people. Like, a population growth of that is not something that would be overbearing on Africa. The problem is Africa is still controlled and colonized. And because of that, no, it can't. It can't feed the colonists who are taking more than they need, taking over overkill. They're taking so much from us so that they can live luxurious lives and get fat off of our exploitation to the point where our people are left with crumbs. So in that situation, absolutely, we can't sustain ourselves in our own continent. Now, this is where it becomes a problem for Europe because they see what's coming. I'm alleging that I think that a lot of what's happening right now with Ukraine and Russia is very calculated. The reason I think that is because the globalist system has put Africans in a position where we're the most dependent on this system to continue than anyone else. The reason is because of, number one, food aid. We get the most food aid from everyone, whether it's US aid, whether it's the United Nations, whether it's so many other aid organizations, British aid, whatever. They're constantly talking about how they're going to feed Africans, right? And on top of that, because of globalism and things like anti-protectionist policies put in place by the WTO, we have to have our economies structured in such a way that, first of all, we open our economies up to anyone to come in and buy what they want. Privatization, that was one of the big stipulations of a lot of the World Bank or IMF loans. You had to allow us to privatize your industries, come into your country and basically buy up what we want so that we can privatize it and take what we want back home to Europe or to the United States or to Canada or wherever. That situation basically is detrimental because we have countries that are not functioning for the best of the people. They're functioning for the best of a class of elites that are far off and far away. That is the current situation with many of us, because when you look at what's happening inside of Africa, when you hear of investment, the investment that you hear all the time more so is talking about buildings, talking about different types of nice infrastructures, talking about trainways. I heard that Ghana's in the process of making some type of subway, like light rail or something like that. That's the investment that we're going to hear about. But we're not hearing about investment in the people, meaning, what do you do with the fact that people don't have an education that's worth a lick? What do you do with the fact that the people are many times starving because the food system is not meant to benefit people locally growing, but meant to benefit people overseas? This only becomes worse with this conflict because we've been put in a situation where, even as the rest of the world is able to sustain their own countries, Africa is not. Africa has been in a position where they've been importing things, basic goods that most people would be able, that Africans could easily grow inside of their own countries, but they've been importing them and instead exporting raw materials to these countries that are going to sell back the things higher price. Now, this becomes a big issue because of this conflict. So let's talk about that. One of the issues that I discussed in as far as the conflict is that right now, the US and Russia, or not the US and Russia, the US and Europe have built into their own countries ways and means to protect themselves from the worst of the worst. I cite in the article that Europe not only right now has programs that they're trying to basically lighten the effects of the war on their own food supply, and the US is doing the same thing, but also just historically, these countries have been more self-sustaining. Well, Africa's become less self-sustaining. Europe and the US have become more self-sustaining. All of that stuff about trade protectionism, anti-protectionism, we know that the West does not follow those types of laws. They don't follow those types of rules. They still have a system where they're able to benefit those who locally grow, those who locally farm, those who locally create. They still have that type of system in place, even while they're putting stipulations on other countries to rid themselves of those types of systems. Because of that, it's being projected that the US and Europe will not feel the brunt of this conflict with Ukraine and Russia. You might not understand what's so big about Ukraine and Russia. The big thing is that literally the West, NATO countries, including the United States and many Western European countries, literally egged on a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And the issue with that is that they are the countries that provide most of the grains for the entire world, grains and corn. African countries, again, these are countries that could, of course, could of course grow their own grains to feed their own population. I was so surprised to hear Nigeria, which I believe has the most arable land of any other or one of the most arable lands of most African countries, imports 40% of their grains and corn or whatever from Ukraine and Russia. Nigeria, huge country, 40%. Um, and yet here we are inside of a situation where there's a war going on, and guess what? Obviously, Ukrainian people are not able to farm. Russia right now is facing sanctions. So the U.S. and Europe did this, knowing very well that the world is dependent. A lot of the world is dependent on these countries as far as providing for food and providing for daily subsistence. They still and not only egged on this war, but put on these sanctions on Russia, a world power, that are going to have debilitating effects on the entire world. Now, the fact that they knowingly did this while they have already built up the capacity to be able to withstand this type of food shortage tells me that this is something that they knew was going to happen. They knew that Africans were going to be in a position where we were going to be starving. They knew that not just Africans abroad, or Africans in the continent, Africans in their own countries are going to be put inside of a position because the food prices are projected to just keep going up. And if they keep going up, we know, first of all, right now, a lot of people can't afford food on the grocery stands. They have to rely on food pantries. How much more if the cost of food doubles? How much more if the cost of food becomes so high that the poorest in America cannot buy, the poorest in Europe cannot buy or afford to buy those foods? They knew that was going to be an issue. They still decided to egg on a war. They knew the effects. They knew the people that would starve. They knew the people who would be put inside of a position of economic deprival. They knew all these things and they still did it. And I don't think they do anything I don't think they do anything by mistake. The fact that they knew tells me that this is something that they wanted to happen, this is something that they anticipated happening, and they really have no regard for you. The fact that your children, whoever, may starve as a result of this conflict. Now, you might think I'm over exaggerating. Let me give you just some of the stats that I cite in this article. And these are not all of them. This is just for um, West Africa and also East Africa. So it's projected that West Africa, because of this conflict, 40 million Africans will go hungry if nothing is done. 40 million Africans just in West Africa. And also, I looked at East Africa. 20 million Africans are not just at risk of hunger, but starvation if nothing is done. This is the situation that they've put us in. And while this is going on, they're telling their citizens, hey, we're not going to feel the brunt of this. This is mostly going to be felt by poor countries. The other really insidious thing is that these aid organizations that many of us have been warning people about, don't trust them, don't look to them as being some savior of our people. These aid organizations have been diverting the food supplies that they used to give to Africa, and Africa became accustomed to, as many other countries became accustomed to. They're diverting them now to Ukraine. So literally, they're taking the food that would go to starving children, and again, that's an expectation. Okay, well, this is something we've been expecting. This is something we've been getting for decades at this point. They're diverting that food to Ukrainians. So one person even remarked, they're basically taking food away from hungry children, away from starving children, to give it to hungry children, talking about the children in Ukraine who might be hungry, but the children elsewhere are starving. This is the situation that they have us in. So all the aid organizations are focusing on Ukraine. No one's focusing on Africa. African officials are warning, we need to get ready for food shortages. I just want to emphasize that doesn't mean the same thing that it means in the West. That means something much more severe. And if we're not careful to hyper focus on building that type of resilience that will not be able to feel the brunt of this, then we're going to be put in a situation where absolutely we could be put in a situation where we are starving. So just to tell you very quickly, as far as solutions, we have to focus on food sustainability, food sovereignty. This is something that all of our people should be focused on. To me, at the top of our list, because I can live possibly without. I can live without clothes, probably live without a house, right? I can't live without food. I actually need food to live. And that's why this has to be at the top of our priorities. Now, obviously, you have people who are farming, people who are doing these things, but they don't get the support that they need from the government. And that's why we have to put pressure on our governments, first of all, to abandon these policies put in place by the World Bank, by the World Trade Organization, by the IMF, all of these organizations that are Western focused, that are globalization focused and focused on benefiting some and basically leaving others completely dependent and in ruins if something like this happens. We have to put our focus on undoing those types of policies. And some people might say that sounds too easy to say, but not effective to do. Absolutely. Everything that we talk about on this channel is coming out of our mouths, but it takes actions. It takes affirmative action. It takes people who are intentionally going to go after the people who they see making these decisions, who are going to call them out, who are going to organize against them, and who are going to really lay out, this is why you cannot do this, because you're starving the same people who you said you're supposed to be serving. That's government action, though. What should we all be doing? To me, when I hear people say they want to invest in Africa, I sometimes I cringe, because a lot of times that investment is individual focused. I would just encourage everyone, if you can buy land in Africa, please think about ways that can be diverted to something that's for the community. And many people are doing this. Many people have not built four walls and just basically isolate themselves whenever they buy land in Africa or in other African nations, even in the diaspora. But I just want to emphasize that we have to make intentional efforts. If that's where you're going to go, if that's where your focus is, make intentional efforts to do something communal. And I think communal farming is something that we absolutely have to focus on. Those who have the means to buy the land, and those who don't, obviously you have the option whether you want to occupy the land. That's a whole nother struggle, obviously. But those who have the means, let's focus on what we can do to reverse course of what's been happening to our people. More and more, we've been put in this place where our people have been isolated from each other because of the system that is being pushed on us, this capitalist, exploitative system of bloodsuckers. We're told to do the same thing to our own people, not thinking about the fact that makes it just as bad as the people that we're leaving. So intentionality is where it is to me. Whether you're someone from the diaspora trying to move to the continent, whether you're someone that's in the continent that's trying to figure out something what to do to divert the situation, intentionality, communal thinking, and consciously going after those who sell out the interest of the people. That's something that cannot be underemphasized. We have to see that people who go into places and say, I'm going to just buy up this so I can have a monopoly and not serve those first who are of my community. Those people must be called out. Those people must be hopefully brought to the light so that they can see their ways, see the error in their ways. And ultimately, we have to make sure that we are protecting our people before we're protecting the interest of the colonial master. Hopefully, you're not protecting the interest of the colonial master. But if you're someone that deals with the international system, please put more emphasis on those who are around you, because those are the ones that are going to turn on you if this thing gets to the point where they're saying it's going to get. Even the IMF has warned that because of the hunger and the instability, the IMF is warning that there's going to be a lot of political instability, a lot of uprisings. Don't think that you're going to be exempt from that, because you look like someone. When you're not doing right by the community has a way of remembering, it has a way of bringing that back on you. And so just remember and be cognizant that if you're really there for the people, be there for the people. Be there not for your own pockets, but be there for the collective upliftment of your people, because that will pay you more. I promise you, pay you more in riches. Maybe not in the type that the system wants to give you, but trust me, it's the riches of life that you'll get. So that's really what I have on this. I do want to hear your all thoughts. Definitely read the article. The article goes more into depth as far as particularities about what's happening right now, as far as what the EU is doing, what is the USA doing, and what exactly are the problems that Africa is basically poised to go through. Just to emphasize, they're saying that people could starve. That's people dying. And that's a backdoor way of achieving genocide. So I think it's intentional. You're free to disagree with me as always, but let's have a discussion and figure out exactly what we need to do to get us out of the situation we're in. So that's all, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
I think what we are suffering from is ideological confusion. That is, that we're not clear, we're not thinking clearly, and that we need a context within which to answer the question, is something good or bad? We assume that we have the same goals, but we never say what they are. It's time for us to think and articulate and establish our goals as Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists. We need vision, we need clarity. Otherwise, we can't answer the question, is it good for African people? Nationalist goal is self-determination in the spirit of Delaney, Garvey, Malcolm, Amos. It is Pan-African commitment, that is the unity of African people worldwide and one Africa on the continent as a basis for African strength. So we are about building a Pan-African world order based on the principles of Ma'at, not an imitation of a European order. Ma'at as justice and truth. We need a nation concept, as Dr. Clark told us. A Black economic program, a cultural program, an independent political organization, independent Black media, independent African-centered education financed by us and controlled by us. All of this presupposes, very importantly, an African Black identity.